Hello guys, and welcome back to the Hybrid Warfare Analytical Group's UCMC's podcast, where our analysts convene to delve into the realms of Russian disinformation, propaganda, and the influence of hybrid warfare in 2024. In these succinct podcast episodes, the team explores recent observations and their analysis, sharing expert opinions and conclusions on the prevailing challenges within the information sphere today. Today, we're going to be focused on what's been happening recently over the last week or so, the recent events concerning new threats from Putin, recent foreign trips to both Uzbekistan and Belarus. I'm your host. My name is Matt, and I have my colleagues with me here today. We've got Nastya, Anton, and Volodymyr. Each of them are going to be debunking their own narratives. Let's start with you, Volodymyr. So tell us more about your narrative and the debunking you have to go with it.
Thanks, Matt. So I'd like to mention that just several days ago, Putin visited his satellite in Minsk. And obviously, Kremlin often use such visits to provoke a wave of new conspiracy theories about Belarusian involvement in the war. From this point, I'd like to notice that according to succinct researchers and military experts from Ukraine and from Western think tanks, there are a consensus about absence of current threat from Russian forces may pose from Belarusian threat, because until now there is about just 2,000 Russian military personnel on territory of Belarus, and these troops are mainly deal with air defense systems and electronic warfare systems as well. And also there are deployed several dozens of Russian jets within Belarusian airports. However, that does not pose an immediate threat to Ukraine, because during more than 2 years, Ukrainian troops were digging Ukraine-Belarusian border. And also we should keep in mind that these areas are quite remote and forested, and that poses the logistical challenges for the Russians. For example, their ongoing invasion in Kharkiv Oblast, their attempts to siege Volchansk, is an example that the logistics of Russian army is still weak chain of their military power. The example of how Russians are exhausted after just 2 weeks of their offensive in Kharkiv Oblast shows us that they still do not obtain enough resources to redeploy them in Belarus and open a new front somewhere in western or northern part of Ukraine and invade from the Belarusian border. That is one point. Another point is that from my perspective, Lukashenko pursue his involvement into the Russian aggression of 24th of February 2022 as a huge mistake. And Kremlin also tried to use Belarus as a leverage of military and nuclear blackmail of the West, while keeping Belarus out of direct involvement into the war, because until now there is some kind of undercovered negotiation between Ukraine and Belarus that there are no attacks from Belarusian territory or airspace. From Ukrainian side, we did not witness any attempts to attack Belarusian military shortages or military bases on territory of Belarus, as well as facilities of oil refinery, and that provide for Russians an opportunity to train their troops in Belarus in forthcoming future, or take some oil, some energy from Belarus, because Ukraine do not target with its drones and Belarusian facilities. And that is a kind of undercovered agreement, I think we may call it so, which is beneficial for both sides. for Ukraine and for Russians, and that agreement keeps Belarus out of the active phase of the war. At the same time, and this is a third point of my analysis, is that keeping Belarus out of the active involvement provides provides the Kremlin an opportunity to blackmail the West, and especially Baltic countries, of the possibility of some provocations, which will be provided by Russian proxies, Belarusian army, because until now, Belarus obtained just about 15,000 well-trained and well-equipped personnel, which is completely not enough to invade into Ukraine and to keep under active control territories and cities in Ukraine. That means that the only aim for Belarusian forces may be involvement in some cross-border provocations, or just disrupt the intention of Baltic states, given the discussions about possible deployment of Baltic states troops, and as well as troops of other Western countries in Western Ukraine. In the case if Russia will broke Ukrainian defense and will succeed. So that is a complex picture of some hidden negotiations, as well as attempts of Kremlin to blackmail the West and Ukraine through its puppet regime in Minsk. But in current circumstances of the war, there is no urgent need for Kremlin to pose the risk of stalemate on other front lines, especially in Donbas region, because Russia do not obtain enough military resources to open a new front line, which will be allocated several hundred kilometers above Russian territory, and which will create numerous problems for Russians in terms of logistics.
So what we can take from that then, Volodymyr, is then, so obviously there's no need to panic. Ukrainians don't need to panic this year, most definitely, because there's only 4 more months left of the good weather period, really, up until September, October. During that time, definitely the Russian troops won't be able to gather their logistics enough to be able to launch, prepare and train forces in order to attack Kyiv. And then obviously we've got the defense, which has already been built. Yes, so am I correct in believing that for this year at least, the threat is just in psychological warfare from Russia?
Yeah, for sure. That's exactly what I'd like to bring here, is about absence of actual threat from Belarus, but that is a perspective for at least several months from now. But we cannot guarantee that if Russia will hold the second phase of large-scale mobilization, we cannot bet on where Russia will deploy these troops. But in any way, it will take them several months, at least half a year, to train properly these new troops and units. That means that it will take just several months for Russia to prepare their rare allocations and logistics in Belarus, and only after that it will have to find out where the resources may be redeployed, and whether it will be resources from other parts of Ukrainian-Russian front line, or it may become new conscripts or personnel which will be engaged through the means of the new mobilization. But as for now, there is no clear evidences that Russians and that Kremlin is really preparing for the new wave of mobilization.
Perfect. I think that's a really important narrative which we needed to be debunked, especially this week and the last few weeks. A lot of people have been worrying. So thank you very much, Volodymyr, for your analysis there. Very important. Anton, your narrative, please. Let's dig into it.
Okay. So my narrative is about reaction of Western media to Putin's statements. And some Western media outlets have expressed skepticism and caution in response to appeared Russian insights that appeared in the consequence of Putin's statements in Tashkent and Minsk about Putin's readiness to negotiate a ceasefire along current battle lines and citing concerns about the true intentions behind his statements, as we know. So there are assertions that Putin's supposed optimism about the war and his appointment of an economist as a defense minister, about what we speak at the latest podcast, has led to the speculation that he's prepared for a long war of attrition and raising questions about real potential implications of this changing. Additionally, Western media focuses on the economic and societal challenges that Russia may face in the prolonging context of sanction and other limitation of contacts with Russia, such as blocking Russian tourists to visit some European countries such as Finlandia and else. So on the moreover, one of the most important topic that Western media has discussed, it is the issue about Ukrainian is about allowing Ukraine to use Western arms against Russian military sites, and the reaction of the Western leaders have varied, which has been used by Russian propaganda. For example, French President Emmanuel Macron has openly stated that Ukraine should be allowed to use Western arms against Russian military sites used to target Ukraine, such as in Belgorod and Kursk and else. At the same time, German Chancellor Olaf Scholz has emphasized that Ukraine's use of Western weapons should always be within the framework of international law and keep question about using, for example, German weapons against Russian military sites open. If we talk about Western media, Reuters wrote that more than 2 years into deadliest land war in Europe since World War II, Putin has increasingly spoken of the risk of much broader global conflict as the West grapes with that to do, and the advance of Russian troops in Ukraine. But at the same time, we see The Guardian that wrote, hours later, Putin claimed that the West had provoked Russia's latest offensive into the Kharkiv region by ignoring Moscow warnings not to allow Ukraine to strike the adjacent Russian region. So Western media try to take a sufficiently critical position regarding the words of the Russian president, but at the same time, they almost always note that the debate on granting permission to Ukraine to strike targets on the territory of Russia continues and moves in the desired direction for Ukraine, but they still there, and this time is important for Ukraine to that this decision have to be applied in shorter times than it will be.
Anton, you talked there about France and Germany are now more open and allowing Ukraine to use their weapons to fight back and defend. That's only been happening over the last day or so, I'm sure you've been monitoring it on the social media chat as well. What has propaganda been saying about the response from Macron and Scholz? Have they reacted again in the kind of predictable way about nuclear war? What has been their kind of justification for escalation, let's say? Have they been trying to escalate the situation?
Of course, if you're talking about Russian propaganda, the narrative of escalation was and I think will be one of the most traditional for Russian media and Russian Telegram channels and bloggers, because this using of these narratives can be useful in case to make some implications and like blackmailing European citizen, because if we talk about war between democracy and autocracy, we know that autocracy have a little like a privilege that they don't need to consult with their citizen. And if we talk about any political decisions, such as allow Ukraine to target to destroy military target by Western weapon in Russia, there have to be in Europe countries there have to be a consensus or some kind of consensus to for politicals to make this decision real. If we talk about narrative in Russian media, they are very loud narrative about upcoming nuclear war, and it is important.
It's very, very true what you were saying about autocratic and democratic, isn't it? So basically it takes weeks of debates and conversation and voting for the democratic side to actually come to a decision, but Russia can do it just like that in an hour, which gives them, as you said, the privilege, the head start. Cool. Thank you very much, Anton. And Nastya, your narrative, please, and dig a little into it for us.
Thanks, Matt. During his visit to Uzbekistan, Vladimir Putin delivered another speech in which he touched on various topics related to the war in Ukraine, and several key points emerged from his speech, notably the legitimacy of President Zelensky, manipulations of the Ukrainian population, and threats from Russia. And firstly, this speech in Tashkent was significant because Putin stated that the only legitimate authority in Ukraine is the Speaker of the Verkhovna Rada, Ruslan Stefanchuk, not President Zelensky. We in the Hybrid Warfare Analytical Group anticipated this rhetoric from the Kremlin, as Zelensky's term would have ended in the late May, if not for the state of war. However, due to the ongoing war, election cannot be held under Ukrainian law, and the president remains in office. This procedure is logical and legal, considering that 20% of Ukraine's territory is occupied by Russia, making transparent and safe elections impossible. We have already seen how Russia conducted its elections in temporarily occupied territories, full of manipulation and pressure on the population, on the people. And Putin's speech didn't shy away from threats either. His latest statements include the topic of creating a sanitary zone in Ukrainian if the Ukrainian armed forces continue to strike Russian territory. Vladimir and Anton mentioned it in their topics, but here we can see that this rhetoric is repeat itself, and specifically Putin associates this with resuming military actions in the Kharkiv region. Again, responsibility for military actions is shifted to the West and NATO. It's not Russia that has launched new military operation in this area, but the West who provoked it. Russia uses this rhetoric of a constant threat from the West to justify its aggression. Putin explicitly stated that they will have to create a safe zone after threats from the West. safe zone, meaning a line of destroyed Ukrainian settlements under Russian control. So who is really threatening whom here? And when discussing blackmail, Putin mentioned another narrative that the Ukrainian people and their government are separate. According to him, the Ukrainian government does not care about its people and does not represent their interests. This theme is widespread in Kremlin rhetoric, despite the current Ukrainian leadership coming to power through transparent and lawful elections. Propagandists have already picked on this, and there is a possibility that this narrative going to be developed, Marina Akhmedova, for example, writing that Zelensky and Blinken wouldn't care if Russia hit some training ground in Lviv with a nuclear bomb, because it would finally provide a reason to retaliate. And this speech is a clear example of how the Kremlin manipulates narratives to portray its actions as defensive and justified.
Although they're the one that are attacking first, yeah? Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Nastya, tell just last one for us for today's podcast. In regards to Zelensky's legitimacy, how is the consensus around Ukrainians and the Ukrainian politicians? It's not just Zelensky's party. Sluha Naroda is also widely shared throughout the whole of politicians throughout Ukraine. Yes.
Yes, it happened. It showed in rhetoric since 2014. Because in a Russian worldview, 2014 was not revolution of dignity, as we, as Ukrainians, consider it, but it rather coup d'état. And by this logic, there is no authorities in Ukraine which may be legitimate in Russians' view, in Russians' eyes, in Kremlin view. So, yeah, you're right.
So just another continuation of old narratives which have been used for the last years. Guys, thank you very much for coming on the podcast today and giving us your narratives. Very, very relevant and very important this week, especially whilst what I can say for myself, the feeling in Kyiv, the feeling in Ukraine at the moment is rather anxious because of all of these operations which are ongoing. But this is why we need to do these podcasts. This is why we need to debunk these information so people understand that it is a Russian disinformation operation. Amazing, guys. Thank you very much. And until next week, speak to you soon.